Hi, welcome everybody to another weekly events program with me, Marius Greyling, and obviously Simon Roche, that's doing these programs for the Suidlanders Media channel on YouTube and a couple of other places. And yeah, what a week we've had. In the weekly events, we spoke about a couple of the things that we will reiterate today that we spoke about on Tuesday. And hi, Simon. Before we jump into it, let me just greet you properly.
Yeah, how's it, Marius?
No, I'm all good. I'm all good. So Tuesday we spoke about India that's going to get sanctioned by Trump for uh, for for buying oil and then reselling it. And he said that's just not on. But then India came out in a newspaper article and calling out the US and the EU for still buying and selling from Russia, still trading on a big scale with Russia. And they said, isn't that a bit two-faced?
Well, yes, and it's worse than that, in fact. The Indian Foreign Ministry spokesman, I'm not familiar with her, and I forget her name, said that when the sanctions were first imposed, in order to ensure stability in global oil markets, the Americans approached India and said, listen, we would be very grateful to you if you would ensure the stability of, as I say, global oil markets, particularly by selling to Europe. So the European Union and the USA, I mean, they're not one and the same entity, but they've acted very much like this
Mm.
over the past 3.5 years, where it concerns Russia and sanctions and this, that, the next thing. Excuse me. They are being really very hypocritical because there was not an agreement signed or anything like that, but she said that we were explicitly encouraged to set up this facility so that the Europeans wouldn't experience a massive oil crisis, particularly considering the blowing up of the Nord Stream gas pipelines. Now, oil and gas are not one and the same thing, but they are used for similar things. That is to say, to generate energy. They're part of the energy ecosystem, if you like. They are the two most crucial elements. So yeah, Marius, it's an absolute dog show. I mean, and the Indians apparently are very, very unhappy. Privately, the Indian government, although they're not jumping up and down, is furious over this, that the Americans would be so hypocritical.
Yeah.
And it's a big threat because the Indian economy is a fairly it's a slow economy. We all know that it took India however long, 130 years to produce its first motor car or first serious motor car, let's say. So, although it's very much on a sharp upward trajectory and it's doing very, very well, it's not an economy that has a massive bedrock,
Mm.
a very thick foundation. India is still finding its way in the world and finding its way very well, make no mistake. But if they get cut out of the US market due to the increased cost of their goods on shelves in the USA, it could do quite a lot of harm to a country that has to keep whatever it is, 1.5 billion people happy. So let's see.
Yeah, and then sticking to the tariff vein that we are in now, you also said something about the pharmaceutical industry with the tariffs that's going to be very bad for the people.
Yeah, 2 days ago, Trump announced that, I think it was 2 days ago, that he would announce within a week tariffs on pharmaceuticals. Now, just to give you some idea of how expensive it is, if you have diabetes, as I do, type 2 diabetes, there are two blood tests that you do. The one is where you prick your finger and you take a sample that tells you how high your blood sugar level is right at this moment. The other tells you how your blood sugar has been doing over 30 days. It's called an A1C test, if I remember correctly. When I was in the USA in 2023, I should point out that diabetes is, or the symptoms, I should say, are very closely connected to stress. So the two factors are what you're putting into your body, or let's say three factors in simple terms: how much exercise you're getting, what you're putting into your body, and stress. And that tour of the USA was beyond stressful for financial reasons. And I had a huge blood sugar spike. So I went to the doctor's rooms in Gallatin, Tennessee, where I was staying with Mr. Richard A. Hamlin and his wife Janice, who very graciously put me up for over 2 weeks, nearly 3 weeks, I think. And I said, I'd like to do an A1C test, but I'm traveling on the South African Rand and my finances are not in a good way. Please, I'm asking you nicely to do something that you don't usually do as medical professionals worldwide. Tell me what I'm in for, because I don't want a situation where you give me a number and I say to you, I simply can't afford that in South African rands. Please. And the woman said to me, I forget the numbers involved, so I'm going to thumb suck them a bit. $150 for the consultation, $100 for the test, $300 for the official lab results, and then another $150 for the second consultation when you come back to get the results and you chat to the doctor.
Sure.
All told, it approached $1,000. I can't remember the exact number, but it was going on for $1,000. 20,000 Rand. I'm exaggerating, but only slightly. So I said, no, thank you very much. And I went to the Walgreens, which is one of the two big chains of pharmacies right across the length and the breadth of the USA. And I did an A1C. I bought an A1C home test kit for $30 odd. It goes to show you how expensive it is, medication is in the USA. If he puts tariffs on pharmaceuticals, the prices are going to be jacked up even more. So I think that Trump could be heading for very, very stormy waters in his little sailing boat of the Trump administration 2.0.
Yeah.
If half the USA discovers that its medical costs have gone up because of a decision like that to put tariffs on medicines imported from India and China and Brazil particularly, but not only, I think he could be in for a lot of trouble, Marius. But yeah, that's my 10 cents worth on the matter.
Yeah. Then other thing that I might think he might be in a bit of trouble is I watched the video clip of George Galloway and Judge Andrew Napolitano that specifically spoke about the Republicans in Congress that subpoenaed all the Epstein files, all the Epstein documents, even subpoenaed Bill and Hillary Clinton to come and testify. Everything, the Supreme Court said everything that they want. They don't have any limit on what the Congress can subpoena for this, except the names of the victims. And George Galloway sort of said the numbers that the pages that Trump's name has been named in this 250,000 page documents that they have is over 100,000 pages. This kind of shocked George Andrew Napolitano, but I mean, like George Galloway said, your name can't be that much in the pages, and you didn't know what was going on. It's just not happening. So I see when those things are released, I see a bit of trouble on the horizon for Trump in that regards.
Yeah, I think he's in big trouble, and I think that's why every time it becomes a hot topic, so every time the subject surfaces again, he does something dramatic. It's as reliable as a clock, Marius. If the Epstein conversation gets hot in a certain given week or a certain day in a month, he does something very, very, very dramatic, bombing the Persians, implementing tariffs, saying something outrageous about Vladimir Putin, moving Ohio-class intercontinental ballistic missile submarines closer to Russia. If you look carefully, although you might be able to say, well, there was a pretext, there was a reason, the timing, yes, but I put it to you that it's very improbable that such dramatic things can happen so dependably on the very days that Epstein is being covered most greatly by the media.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an accident.
No, I don't think so as well. Then to jump to the Ukrainian-Russian war, you've said something about the Ukrainian desertion numbers.
Yeah, well, there are two things to say. A Ukrainian parliamentarian, whose name I forget, it's Maria something, revealed on Sunday, I think, that the number of desertions from the Ukrainian army is now over 400,000.
Sure.
And that's just worth people knowing. Many people follow this story and they hear one thing in News 24 and then they hear us say something completely different. And many people don't know what to believe anymore. We've been reliable on Ukraine for 3.5 years. We've never put a foot wrong, and long may it continue that way. But I understand that it's still very difficult for some people to believe that Simon Roche is telling the truth, but that News 24 is looking them straight in the eye and lying about it. There is still a tendency among the normies, among the great middle of society, to trust mainstream media. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that the head of Ukrainian military intelligence, Kirill Budanov, a very right-wing banderist. The banderists are the people who idolize Stepan Bandera, who was a Nazi who collaborated with the Germans during World War II. And he's a very right-wing guy. Said in April that if by August something hadn't been resolved, if there hadn't been a change, that Ukraine's ability to continue the fight would be neutralized. Well, on Saturday, he followed up. It was broadcast on Saturday. I don't know if it was recorded on Saturday or on Friday. He followed up by saying in an interview, a television interview, that Ukraine might end up like his stamp collections countries, where countries have, he's a stamp collector. He has stamps of countries that no longer exist. That one day Ukraine might be like one of those countries whose only remains are stamps. And I think if you take those two statements together, the member of parliament revealing this mass desertion rate, and what Kirill Budanov is saying, then you don't have to trust whether I've been telling the truth about massive Russian advances, about the Ukrainian front lines collapsing, about the massive fatality rate of Ukrainian soldiers, so very much higher than the Russian fatality rate. Just believe what the Ukrainians are saying. So that's just a little update on the Ukraine war. I think that we can expect big things there in days and weeks to come, Marius. I think if they're in a crisis circumstance, then they're either going to, totally collapse.
Yeah.
Or, as we discussed on Tuesday, somebody's going to stage a massive false flag event to precipitate the intervention of US and European forces. I don't know. I'm sticking my neck out a little bit here. It's very wobbly at the moment. It's very difficult to assess. I think we're just going to have to keep our eyes on the ball for another few weeks to see what happens.
Yeah, no wonder they need to recruit the elderly to bulk up the numbers because the desertion rate is so high. So they need to somewhere get more men for the front lines. Then Simon, you had one or two other things you mentioned off air to me.
Yeah, okay. This is in Business Day. Bring them on, Mbalula says of US sanctions on ANC leaders. The Secretary General of the ANC says that the party will not be coerced into reversing its progressive transformation laws. I should give credit where it's due. This article is written by Luyolo Mkentane. ANC Secretary General Figile Mbalula has thrown down the gauntlet to the Trump administration. For anybody who wonders what that is, it's a medieval thing where if you threw down a glove, you were challenging another man to a duel. Has thrown down the gauntlet to the Trump administration, saying the government of national unity won't abandon redressing colonial imbalances under duress from the US. In July, US legislators voted to advance a bill. There's a process, that proposes reviewing the United States' relationship with South Africa due to objections over its foreign policy and potentially imposing sanctions on government officials. The bill proposes a full review of the bilateral relationship and to identify South African government officials and ANC leaders eligible for the imposition of sanctions upon them. The measure would need to pass the House and the Senate before it could be signed into law. Many bills at this stage never go to a vote. In other words, they are never passed. But the point being, I should just mention this, that there is a general consensus among observers that it has now passed a committee. The committee voted for it to proceed to the floor of the House of Representatives. And there's a general consensus that it will be passed there and probably also in the Senate. Mbalula's comments come as the government is frantically trying to secure a trade deal with the US before Trump's decision to impose a 30% tariff on South African exports. Now, of course, we know that the tariffs have already kicked in.
Yeah.
I beg your pardon. Is it tomorrow, Marius?
No.
It was the 1st of August.
It was the 1st of August, yeah.
Yes, okay. Sorry, I thought for a second, heavens above. Have I lost all track of things? So, yes, this author has made a bit of a hash by saying that the 30% tariff on South African exports has already kicked in. And as we discussed on Tuesday, a company called Gendermark has already lost a 750 million rand deal. That was revealed on Monday. So it happened overnight, basically between Friday, the weekend, and the next working day, Monday. The tariff is set to come into effect at week's end. This is dated, just to be clear, in case people think that I have really lost my mind. This article is dated the 6th of August at 1 minute past 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So sadly, Mr. Mkentani doesn't know what day of the week it is. He doesn't really know what he's talking about. Briefing the media on the outcomes of the ANC National Executive Committee meeting held at the weekend, Mbalula said on Monday the ANC would not be coerced into reversing its progressive transformation laws. If it means we are going to suffer through sanctions as leaders of the ANC, let it be, he said very bravely. We will never back imperialists to subvert our democracy, to subvert our sovereignty. It happened during the period of struggle. It will happen even now. We will never forsake our country, which we fought for its liberation. Not this ANC, not this leadership. So a very emotional Winston Churchill type heroic stand against the big bully. But of course, we know that everything that he's saying is absolute rubbish. We know that the Trump sanctions against ANC leaders are inspired by a number of things. Number one, Elon Musk and Starlink. Elon Musk was part of the administration for a few months, and he was a prime mover in this regard because the ANC won't allow Starlink to come into South Africa unless and until the African National Congress gets whatever the percentage is. There are different numbers that have been mentioned, but a minimum of, and we know this for sure, a minimum of 25% plus one share. In other words, technically more than 1/4 of the business. We also know that it's inspired by the ANC taking Israel to the ICC or the ICJ, I forget now for the moment, on behalf of Iran. The evidence that the Jewish community in South Africa has presented over the past whatever period of time is pretty persuasive. If you watch those videos done by those various Jewish commentators, you have to be convinced. The reality is that the ANC took that case to court, that is to say, the Israeli Gaza genocide case, at the instigation and behest of Iran. And Donald Trump has alluded subtly to that. And thirdly, Donald Trump has mentioned the murders of whites, the farm murders, etc. And when Cyril Ramaphosa went to the White House to defend the ANC, defend South Africa against scurrilous lies from the White House, of course, he was deeply embarrassed when Trump said, "Turn off the lights," and he showed the video material to substantiate his argument that indeed, under ANC governance, there is a massive murder problem. And famously, one of the entourage of our president said, yes, but in fact, the murders are not just of whites. The murder rate across the country is astronomical. Those were not his exact words, but all he did was make a complete fool of himself.
Yeah.
And then another one of the gang of clowns said, oh, yes, and rape is actually, we mustn't forget about rape. And the point that they were making is Donald Trump is wrong to focus on the white people because we're all being killed and we're raping everybody left, right, and center. You know, you should broaden your horizons a little bit, is the point that they were trying to make. And all that they really did was demonstrate that South Africa is lawless. So this character goes on to say, we will still pursue redress because we are not equal in this country. The economy is still male, white dominated. He said it was impossible to abandon transformation laws. The Trump administration, said Mbalula, is asking us to abandon the very essence of what we are, which is not possible. Now, of course, that's the argument that they would make, but what turns this really into a farce is this brings everything into sharp focus. In a joint press conference hosted this week by Trade Minister Parks Tau and his counterpart in international relations and cooperation, Ronald Lamola, they said the government, in partnership with the Industrial Development, they said that the government, in partnership with the Industrial Development Corporation, would invite applications from eligible companies to absorb and offset the new 30% tariff by cutting their underlying costs. Marius, in my opinion, that paragraph illustrates the circus full of clowns that is the African National Congress government better than any other thing that has happened over the past 30 to 35 years.
Yeah.
Nothing is quite so ridiculous as that. So what they're saying is We're going to invite eligible companies, like such as Marius Greyling Citrus Exporters Incorporated, to absorb and offset the new 30% tariff by cutting your underlying costs. In other words, they will allow you to cut your costs. They will invite you to cut your costs. They will invite you to not pay quite such good salaries, not pay so much for electricity, not pay so much for fuel, and to cut your fertilizer and seed costs.
Yeah.
They will invite. It's not. You can't be. It's not possible.
Yeah.
To have adequate harm done to your brain that you can comprehend that.
Yeah.
You can't be born stupid enough to make sense of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I think, Marius, that this is a very important thing, because we're at a point in time when very much of the country is beginning to recognize the ANC for what it is. We saw last year the very poor election results of the ANC, where they went from, I think, the previous election, national general elections, from 59% or something like that down to 40 and some small change. And then we heard in, I think it was November of last year, that a big poll had been conducted that revealed that the African National Congress's support had dropped to 32% there or thereabouts. And then quite recently, when I say recently, perhaps 5 or 6 months ago, 5 months ago, a follow-up poll revealed that the ANC's support was now lower than that of the Democratic Alliance. And I think that many serious people, intelligent people, thoughtful people, people who are not clowns, who are taking their lives very seriously, will read that one paragraph and they will write the ANC off in their minds forever.
Yeah.
Because it's just now too ridiculous for them to be taken seriously. The economy is in a terribly bad way. Davy revealed recently that a correct calculation of South Africa's growth prospects, GDP growth prospects this year, would come out at about 0.8%, and nowhere near the ANC's, I think last year they were talking about 2.5%. Then they revised it down to 2%, and I think it might have been revised lower again. But it's way less than a third of what the ANC said that they wanted it to be. I mean, if a government is out by 2/3, they should not be the government. If they have so little comprehension of the economy, they're the wrong people to be doing the job. And Davy Ruud said that the tariffs may remove 0.6 of the 0.8. In other words, we may only have 2% growth this year. Now, the 30% tariffs and the sanctions, the proposed sanctions on ANC leadership, are two entirely different things. But the point is that in the same week that the Minister of Trade and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the two guys principally who failed to go to America in a prompt and punctual way to try to stave off the tariffs, who left it to 1 week before implementation. Excuse me getting worked up here, but this is enough to give you a blooming, I don't know what, thrombosis or something.
Yeah. Well, Simon,
These guys
our time is almost done.
Oh, yes. Okay, Marius.
Something I want to end on. I watched a clip of that speech that Mbula made. And that is the thing that stand out, like that paragraph is standing out for you. What he said in his speech was, he said the ANC struggled to get to get the country where it is today. They struggled to get the democracy where it is. They struggled when until 95 they finally got it. But they are still struggling. They are still struggling, and that sentence was poorly constructed from them because I immediately in my brain went, yes, you guys are struggling. You are correct. You are still struggling. You have not achieved anything. And yeah, so I don't know who wrote his speech, but that was just, they struggled to get it. And once they got it, they are still struggling. Yeah. So that sums
Yeah.
it up for me perfectly. Simon, thanks once again for joining me. And yeah, I hope you have a lovely, lovely evening. And then I'll most probably speak to you on Tuesday again.
Yes, yes. Okie dokes, Marius. Thanks again for having me.
That's a great stuff. Cheers, Simon. Bye.
Bye bye.